I know that the exam system proved to be beneficial to the autocrat,
To the
right?
autocrat, not to the
Oh,
state in general?
no, that's a good way of looking at it. It was also good to the system as far as the autocrats constituted a major part of that system, right? So
Yeah.
essentially, it promoted autocratic stability. And if you look at the data on the duration of the rulers, they increased after they introduced the exam, and the length of the dynasty also increased somewhat, not as much as the duration of the rulers, but that also increased. And also China became a unified country after the 6th century. Before the 6th century, there was period of unification, but there was also a long period of disunity. After that, 6th century, basically China remained unified except for a short period of time. But majority of that time period is a unified country. China today is a unified autocracy. So it promoted the duration of the ruler rule. It promoted the longevity of the system. It promoted the unification of the country.
As I was reading some of your essays and watching some of your prior interviews, two things that stuck out for me when it came to these exams. I've actually read books about this, and it's a vast subject of how these came about. But one of the things that I realized is that, unlike Europe, Chinese monarchs, emperors, were sort of surrounded by people that were not in the elite, that were not,
Yeah,
let me correct that were not born into
yeah,
the
yeah,
elite
yeah,
class. That's a
yeah,
difference.
yeah.
And this was sort of subtle. It took me a while to catch up to this. Uh, is is my assessment correct here?
Your assessment is absolutely correct. And I'm writing another book with a co-author of mine, Claire Young. We have data to show after the exam was introduced in 6th century, the people around the emperor, the people around the autocrat, became even more of a commoner background than before, right? So the exam definitely tipped the balance in favor of those people who hailed from humble backgrounds relative to born elites.
That didn't exist anywhere else. I mean, if you look at, I don't know, in Middle East, Europe,
Yeah,
the
yeah,
kings and queens were surrounded by other
that's right.
nobility, born
Yeah,
into nobility, right?
yeah. Yeah, so to get back to the earlier question you asked, is China unique? Yeah, I would argue it is unique, right? And the exam system was introduced so early, and then it had this democratization, democratization or democratizing effect in terms of the mobility, upward mobility, right? So this is kind of a almost like the myth of American dream, right? So from the
Yeah.
rags to the riches, and the exam system did that, right? And whether or not it democratized the system, that's a separate debate. I don't think it democratized the
Yeah.
system. It actually did exactly the opposite. But in terms of the mobility, what's also amazing about this system is that it has both upward mobility and downward mobility, right? And you
I
could,
don't follow. What do you mean downward
well,
mobility?
you can get promoted, but you can also get demoted.
Based on
But
merits or politics or
no,
both?
no, based on your performance. And
Yeah.
so it was a genuine meritocracy. Sometimes we think about meritocracy only in terms of upward mobility, but a true meritocracy has both upward and downward mobility.
Of course. Yeah.
Yeah, one of the most famous scholars on the exam system is Pingding Ho, and he wrote this big book as early as 1964, documenting both upward and downward mobility. That was really, really incredible.
Yeah, so once you get to a place, you're not entitled to remain there unless you
That's right.
perform.
That's right.
So all of this sounds so positive. It's just a merit-based
Yeah.
civilization going back to the
Yeah.
6th century. Europe
Yeah.
doesn't catch up with that.
Yeah.
Gosh, let me see, till late 1700s when you look at
Yeah. Yeah.
France
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
England.
Well, Prussia started.
That's true.
Yeah. So Prussia was the
Frederick
first.
the Great. You're right.
Yeah.
Yes.
Frederick the Great. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so what's the problem? This sounds so fabulous. This should have.
The,
Did this
yeah.
help China's economy?
It did exactly the opposite. And
That's where
yeah.
I don't follow.
Okay. Um, so going back to our earlier distinction between homogeneity and heterogeneity,
Hmm.
this system promoted homogeneity and it completely eliminated heterogeneity, right? So if you think about economic growth, technological development, it required a degree of heterogeneity or differences of ideas,
Entrepreneurship,
creativity,
inventions, and what have you.
entrepreneurship, disruption, right? So all the kind of buzzwords that we talk about, we use to apply to Silicon Valley,
Exactly.
apply, right? So the system was so effective in promoting upward and downward mobility and in homogenizing the ideas and ideology. It was so successful in that area that it demolished all these other forms of mobility, right? So, and also think about another effect. This is civil service exam. You succeeded at the exam, you got promoted or incorporated into the bureaucracy. It was so powerful that everybody wanted to go into bureaucracy. Okay, suppose you want to run
Versus
a
opening up their own shop or their own sort
absolutely.
of entrepreneur. Oh,
See, it completely diverted human capital from economic arenas, technological arenas, or from political opposition to bureaucracy, right? And so that's the trick. And it is, and this is something that that is so I have mixed feelings about this system, but exactly for the same reason you just pointed out. It was democratizing, it was fair in many, many ways and quite legitimate, but then it led to this result.